Welcome back to Talk Black and Give Back. I am your host, Jennifer Nickerson-Turner, and this month I want us to look at a question that's been weighing on me. In fact, I really don't have a layout for this podcast other than a series of questions and trying to come up with a series of solutions that might possibly work, right? So, in fact, I just want you to help me talk through this today. So here's the question. Whose Supreme Court is this? Are we living in an America that is truly colorblind, or are we living in an America that is intentionally blindfolded? When we look at what the highest court of the land is doing right now, the Supreme Court, they are trying to completely erase race from our laws and our schools. Let's be clear, these rulings aren't about fairness. To me, they feel more like a reaction to race becoming kind of uncomfortable for white America. They want to pretend like race doesn't really matter, wipe the slate clean, and act like we're already on a perfectly level playing field. But this approach is going to be dangerous. And I would beg to differ and say that it's even willfully ignorant. Okay? As a black woman living and working right here in the South, I see the unfair systems that hurt our communities every single day. This is why I feel kind of compelled, if you will, to talk about this right now. We have to understand why the Supreme Court's recent rulings have been so devastating to our country as a whole. We have to kind of demand that our legal system look at reality through the lenses of our ancestors so that we don't duplicate these mistakes. And I talk about this a lot on Talk Black and Give Back because I feel like we're going backwards a lot of times. And some of the things that's coming down across the country is unprecedented. I mean, there's no other word. It's first time this has ever happened, so who thought that people were so ignorant? So I want you to think about it. When you make decisions that affect the whole country, you must look through the eyes of the people who fought, the people who bled, the people who died, just trying to move our nation forward. It was their resilience and their understanding of racism, the deep-rooted racism, that forced America to change for the better. Now, if you erase the memories of their struggle, if you ignore the reality of an America that legally separated black and white people just a little over 60 years ago, you leave that door wide open for hatred, and you invite that same hatred that we've been trying to close out and we're going to step right back through that same door today. And then we're going to pass that same nasty hatred right down to the next generation. And I see it happening before my eyes. All this race baiting and stuff on social media and stuff. I mean, I see it happening every day. So please understand, America cannot build a fair future if we refuse to accept the truth of our past. Black people have been held down in this country for generations. This extended right into the lives of our parents born in the 1950s and 60s, like my parents. That happened because of the lasting damage of slavery and hatred and segregation. Accepting that truth right there, pause for a minute, sit on it, like it. Accepting that truth isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about recognizing that our laws and the programs were built because of that hateful history. They were created specifically to protect equity. So when they tried to rectify things in the 60s, they were trying to protect equity, establish equity, because there was none for Black America. This is why this month, May, is really important. And I think that's probably what kind of brought up the discussion for me. Because May of 1954 was the passing of Brown versus the Board of Education with the Supreme Court. And that court didn't look away from the topic of race. They stared it in the face, and they knew that to destroy segregation, they had to make a conscious, intentional effort to protect Black children. children like my mom and my dad. Yet today, this current court is actively undoing everything, all the progress from our parents' lifetime. They have completely banned schools from using race-conscious admissions. And that, in doing that, race consciousness, it only builds diversity in college campuses. But they claim, the Supreme Court now claims, that it violates the Constitution. Now, they did leave that little tiny loophole saying that, students can write an essay, an admissions essay, and, how race has shaped their lives. But to be honest, they took away the college's ability to balance the numbers so that it's truly diverse. So they basically told our youth that you can write about your struggles, but we're no longer going to intentionally fix what we've rigged in the game. So let's call it what it is. And that's a huge step backwards. That's what it is. And their logic, to me, is garbage. The Supreme Court claims America doesn't need to look at race anymore because we are supposedly colorblind now. Or they're trying to find a colorblind society. Well, that decision is a direct slap in the face to everything that the generation before us survived. So let's talk about my family for a moment, okay? Because I grew up, many of you know, Alamance County, North Carolina, so I'm in the South. When the Supreme Court ordered integration back in '54, the system didn't magically change overnight. I think a lot of people think that, that's been 70 years. That's been, 100 years. All decisions took time because even though the rules changed, the people who were in power did not. So it took over 10 years now for the school districts to get on board down here in Alamance County. Back then, if you were black and you lived in this area, your choices, you only had 2 choices, right? And they were controlled by the system. If you lived in the city of Burlington, they had you go to Sellers Gun. Some people called it Jordan Sellers, high school, but it was Sellers Gun. And then if you lived outside of the city, then you went to Central High School, and that was in Graham. And Central was an all-black high school that I don't even think it was built to like 61. But in 1968, they closed the doors and integrated. But it was open until 1968. Now you think about that timeline. In 1968, both of my parents were right here, right there in middle school and in high school in all black schools. Now I remember listening to my mom and dad talk about it and how hard it was to get education back then and fairness, equity, that was just something that was theoretical, right? It wasn't anything that anybody had actually achieved in the 60s. So, not in the South, but they used to talk about, integrating and being on buses with white people. And, because it was when you go from having to walk miles to school because there's only one black school to being on a bus, like what, could you imagine? So I'm trying to put you in their mind state right now and traveling, walking clear across the county so that you can go to school because there's only 1 or 2 buildings that accept black children. So people were walking and exhausted and, just going the distance just to go to a school that even welcomed them. So when this current Supreme Court sits in their rooms, these fancy rooms and offices, and decide how unfair it is to consider race in something like college admissions, less than 60 years ago, after my own parents sat in segregated classrooms right here in Alamance County, that is the most absurd nonsense I've ever heard. It really is. Now, I want to address something else. When this ban on affirmative action came down, A lot of black people didn't mind seeing it go, to be honest, because they didn't feel like, well, they didn't like feeling like they were a token in the room, right? Whether it be a classroom or a boardroom or a workroom, you know, it was always one black, or however, whatever that percentage was to get some kind of government subsidy for you to hire black people, because trust me, they weren't doing it for nothing anyway. And if you met those numbers, you got whatever. That's a heavy feeling to feel, you know, when you're in a system where you rarely see faces that look like you, and schools, you have to only let in a tiny number of people that look like you, so a tiny number of black students. That can feel like, that makes you feel like they're just checking a box. It makes people look hard to kind of examine whether or not, did they get here from hard work, or you'll question yourself, like, you know, was it my work? Did I work hard enough? Or did I truly earn my spot? Or did I just get this job or this schooling to seat because I'm black? So, but we have to look closer at that token feeling, because it wasn't a flaw in the policy. It really was just a symptom of white institutions only doing the bare minimum. So if the rule comes down and strips away that balancing tool entirely, which it did, we have to face the reality that race is a factor in every single decision that people make. You can't leave a race out of something when it is the very first thing that people see. It is the first thing people judge. It is heavily influenced for all your decisions, all the decisions that people make, even on your application, be it school or work. When we're hiring teams or admission offices, when our hiring teams or admission offices claim that we're blind to race, and I'm throwing up quotes, you know, quotations kind of, I talk with my hands, so, you know, I get thrown off a lot, but hidden biases kind of run the show, you know, because of course you can't appear to be considered on your race. So we say now we're blind to race. Well, still your hidden biases are going to show. And for example, let me put it in layman's terms. If your admission process heavily factors in legacy students, for example, meaning you give priority to kids who of people who have graduated from your institution, and they graduated decades before, who do you think that benefits? When many black Americans, at least my age, were first-time college students. My children's age, first-time college students in their families. So what legacy student benefits the average black person? It benefits the white families who actually allowed into those elite spaces decades ago. And if you only prioritize the families and friends you already know, your institutions will naturally stay completely white. Now that bias is real, whether you see it or not. And to say that ignoring race fixes that problem, it's just a legal cover to really the deep-seated biases and racism that runs completely and allows it to run completely unchecked. So this is why this current court is not colorblind. I mean, it's not colorblind at all. They're blindfolding us to systemic racism while handing down these unfair rulings. And if you want to see what this new segregation looks like, you just take a look and connect the dots between the classrooms and the workplaces and the voting booths and the neighborhoods with all this gerrymandering, okay? That's what the new racism looks like. And they're using legal systems to build the wall around white wealth and political power under the disguise of neutrality. Now look at how they're attacking all these voting rights right now. The conservative majority recently struck down voting maps, ruling and creating the districts districts where black voters actually have a voice is an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. Come on now. Think about the hypocrisy in that. The court uses the excuse of being colorblind to tear apart maps that give black voters a fair share of power. They're allowing seats to dilute our collective voting strength, making it damn near impossible for our communities to elect leaders who look like us or even care about us. And this blindfold is choking out job opportunities too. Conservative groups are now using legal systems to target corporate diversity programs, minority fellowships, grants meant for black-owned businesses. They're actively shutting down pipelines that give young black professionals a foot in the door, even in elementary and high school. School boards are now terrified to even implement any kind of diversity initiatives because they know the court's waiting to strike them down, saying that they're not inclusive. Well, I'm confused because it is such hypocrisy. Let me tell you how far this has gone. I recently saw where, and you're going to have to forgive me, my tone in this, okay? Where this white man, and I can't remember his name, but it was something that popped up on my feed that said this white man was suing a digital platform called Find a Black Doctor. And he claimed that it formed, that the platform was formed on a racial bias. No, no, sir. I beg to differ. If you want to find a white doctor, all you have to do is pick up the damn phone. Because at least 7 out of 10 doctors in this country are white, at least in my counties now. Look, and that's no statistic. That's just me seeing all white doctors growing up. I saw them for 40 years. I was probably in my 40s before I ever seen a black doctor. Definitely before I ever had one as a primary healthcare physician. So it is not hard to reach out and find a white doctor. So how would you feel discriminated against because the search is on for a black doctor when there's probably at least maybe 1 out of 10 just in your immediate area, if you're in the South? So where is the real discrimination in this? Do you see how the reverse discrimination card is being played when white people have not been oppressed in this country by any means? That is not discriminatory to want to find someone who looks like you, because my issues are black issues and they impact me according to my body. And it is mighty nice to find someone who can relate and who could tell me the different makeups of my body as opposed to a white body. And there are differences. That's why we lead the statistics in heart disease and diabetes and all of these things, because we don't have the same makeup, people. So when you tie all of these things together, the college bans, the workplace backlash, the rigged voting maps, the broken systems, you see the trap. You should see the trap. And it's a catastrophic domino effect that's going to hit the most vulnerable people in our communities. The Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, they should have, and I'm emphasizing, racial conscious protections. I'm not saying race discriminatory protections. I said race conscious protections where equity is involved in every case. Because there's no equity here either. We're in a diverse America where there is no equity. And there is no inclusion. If you were made to include me and you didn't want to include me, and then you put me out again with another ruling, and now I'm forced back out, how am I included in the decision making across this country? Instead, high achieving black students who are more than fully qualified for these top universities are being pushed right down into underfunded schools. And this is, it's just gonna, it's suffocating these black institutions because they're not getting government funding. So you're suffocating them. They're not getting the funding, and these students are going way into debt. The colleges are going into debt. They're not getting the money to support the students who are no longer essentially qualified by their blackness. And I'm saying that sarcastically because blackness doesn't qualify me to go into a room. Blackness was what got me in the room. But what qualified me was my 4.0 GPA. Because you're not letting dummies into a room anyway in any institution that I know of. So, let's be honest about what's happening here. The people currently in power want an America where everyone looks like them because they want to stay in power. And that's a deep fear of anyone different stepping into their spaces. And that's just a plain fact, But if we look at what this does to our entire society, it's incredibly dangerous. As a nation, we need a growing pool of smart, creative people who can think outside of the box. If we put our talent only in one narrow white stream, America is going to become stagnant and fall behind amongst all the superpowers in the world. New ideas and breakthroughs only come from diversity. And when everyone grows up in the exact same neighborhood with the exact same resources, they find the exact same mindset. You cannot innovate if everyone in the room thinks the exact same way. Different mindsets, different solutions, and entirely new possibilities only come from our differences. Now you think about that for a second. I'm going to pause. When you shut those differences out, you shut down progress for everybody. So, now what I'm going to do, I've got more things that's on my radar to talk about, but I think that's probably enough thoughts about, some of the things that the Supreme Court's doing right now. So what I want to do is take the time for a direct call to action today. This is a call. I'm going to make a call for philanthropic organizations, foundations, individuals with wealth. If you have money to invest, stop feeding the multi-billion-dollar endowments of white universities. Stop feeding them to them. Intentionally drive your wealth into historically underfunded institutions. Invest in HBCU endowments. Build their campuses. Fund their scholarships. And give them the resources to hold up the generation running to them for shelter that are feeling attacked, where the laws are changing to support anybody but black. If the government refuses to provide equity, private wealth must step into the gap to protect our future. And this statement, this podcast is not discriminatory. And if you view it that way, I'm sorry, pick up the phone and call my organization. Ask for Jennifer Nickerson-Turner so we can have a discussion. The number's 336-343-8694. Now, I know some of you listening, you feel completely helpless. You're like, well, Jennifer, the president elects the Supreme Court justices. I know that. But we have things that we can do to get rid of them. It's never been done before. I mean, it was tried like in somewhere around 1805. But it's never been done before. But we have things that we can do. So I'm tired of feeling helpless. I'm going to put it in plain text, plain English text for you. If I could speak Spanish, I would speak it to Spanish people too, okay? But I can't. I sound like an elementary school kid. But we're not powerless. That's my message. So I'm going to lay out a blueprint right here. This is a blueprint to fire the Supreme Court Justice. And it runs directly through our votes. To get them out, the House of Representatives has to vote by a simple majority, just to charge them in what they call impeachment. Then that goes to the Senate, where 2/3 of them have to vote, officially kick them off the bench. But the reality of that, the politicians sitting in those seats right now in the House and in the Senate are not for us either. They're the ones who put the Supreme Court justices in there with the White House. So here's our game plan. It's just an idea. And again, if you got any issues with it, I'm happy to discuss it with anyone out there who has other ideas. But I don't want anybody replying anything about racism, race baiting, none of that stuff, because I'm trying to come up with solutions that make sense, and it makes sense for everybody. And I'm putting them in layman's terms for everyone to hear. So here's my game plan. And this is my promise to you. If the House of Representatives refuses to vote to impeach these biased judges, then we're going to have to vote them out. Vote to get rid of the House of Representatives. If they're not for the people, vote to get rid of them. And that vote is coming up in November. If the Senate refuses to hold a real trial because they don't care about our communities either, then we're going to have to vote them clean out the Senate. We need to elect people who care about all people. We need a 2/3 majority of leaders who will either reconstruct this broken court by expanding it or putting terms on it. Because right now they just in there until they just get old as dirt and die. Or, they would be so happy to resign, and that's probably because some nonsense is on them and they don't want it to come out, so they just resign. But that's not fact. That's just my opinion. Okay, so we need to use our power of impeachment to clean the house. There's no better time than right now. If we can't touch the Supreme Court right now because we don't elect them, we can touch the politicians who we do elect. So we're going to organize. We're going to have to organize. We're going to have to get our communities and the voters around us on board. And we're going to have to fire the elected officials who we have trusted to work for us. And then the next group that come in, if they don't get rid of those Supreme Court justices, then we'll have to do the same, rinse and repeat, until we get someone who's going to do their job in the House and in the Senate and in our Supreme Court. They can't continue to roll back our parents' progress, our ancestors' progress. And once we build a government that actually reflects the heart of the majority of Americans, that's including Black America, that includes the majority of Americans, then we're going to look straight at the Supreme Court and let them know that we're coming for you next. After we get rid of this House, after we get rid of the Senate in November, get out and vote, guys. Anyway, so y'all have kind of helped me talk through things, but I hope you got some messages. I hope we got a starting point and some of the things that we can fix and things that we can do here. So I just thank you for listening to this month's podcast, this month's episode of Talk Black and Give Back. Keep your eyes open. Keep fighting in your communities, however you can fight. And take care of yourselves and take care of others. Until we see you next month. Take care.